I was finalizing the guest list for my wedding when a message from Mom appeared on my screen. Your sister's wedding is the family's priority. We can't make it to yours. No exclamation, no pause, just final. It felt like a quiet door closing. I didn't argue, I simply typed fine and shut my laptop. A week later, while they were preparing for Chloe's big day, the world learned that my own ceremony had already taken place, under the olive trees of my $6 million villa in Tuscany. When the photos spread, their silence said everything. Before I explain how it happened, don't forget to like and comment where you're listening from. Sometimes, the people who should stand with us simply don't. When people ask what growing up in our house was like, I never know how to answer. From the outside, we looked like a perfect family. Matching sweaters in Christmas photos, wide smiles for the camera. But if you looked closer, the pattern was clear. Every story, every celebration, somehow centered around my younger sister, Chloe. She was the focus, and I was the quiet balance keeping things steady. I once thought it was normal how Mom's face lit up when Chloe walked in, or how Dad bragged about her dance trophies at every dinner. When I brought home science fair ribbons or straight A's, they nodded politely and moved on. Mom often said, "You're lucky, Esther. Things just come easier for your sister." That word, lucky, always stung, making my hard work feel invisible. There's a photo album in my parents' living room that tells the story better than I could. Page after page of Chloe, twirling, smiling, blowing candles, going to prom. I show up maybe twice, half turned or cropped out. When I was 16, I found a photo where I'd been standing right beside her, but in the printed version, my face had been trimmed away. Mom said it made the picture look cleaner. I didn't cry. I just stopped expecting to be included. Grandma Helen was the only one who noticed. During family dinners, she'd whisper, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Some people only see what's shiny." She had a way of making me feel seen without needing to explain. My cousin Rachel, too. She was the one who remembered my birthdays when my parents didn't. But favoritism doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly until silence feels safer than confrontation. By adulthood, it had become the family's unspoken rule. When Chloe missed my college graduation, Mom called it a misunderstanding. When she borrowed money and never paid it back, Dad said she was still finding her way. So when Mom's text came about the weddings, I wasn't shocked. It only confirmed what I already knew. I had spent my life adjusting, bending to keep others comfortable. But that night, staring at that message, something changed. For once, I didn't bend. I looked around my apartment, the hum of the fridge, the scent of cedar candles I'd lit to calm myself. My wedding invitations sat neatly on the counter, sealed in gold wax. I'd imagined them displayed on my parents' fridge. Now I pictured them, unopened, pushed aside for Chloe's glossy celebration. Beneath the hurt, there was a strange calm, a realization that maybe it was time to stop asking for space in their story. 2 days later, Chloe called as if nothing had happened. Her voice was bright and sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. "Can you believe it?" she said. "The venue we wanted opened up last minute. It's the same weekend as yours, but that's fine, right? You're in California, we're in Boston. It's destiny." Destiny. She actually said that word. I stayed quiet, listening to the clinking of her bracelets through the phone, realizing she was waiting for me to congratulate her. "That's great, Chloe," I said evenly. "Perfect timing." She giggled. "I knew you'd understand. You're always so reasonable. My lifelong role in our family. Calm, mature, predictable. The one who carried the weight while they made excuses for her." The next evening, Mom called. Her voice had that careful tone she used when trying to soften bad news. "Sweetheart, about the wedding dates. Chloe's fiancé's family can only do that weekend. She's very emotional right now, and it would mean so much if you could be flexible." Flexible. Another word that used to define me. "So you want me to move my wedding?" I asked quietly. Mom hesitated. "We just think it would be easier for everyone. You're independent, Esther. You'll understand." The irony almost made me laugh. "Easier for them, not for me." "Mom," I said slowly, "you promised you'd be there." She sighed, weary and dismissive. "It's not about sides, it's just logistics." That word hit harder than she knew. Logistics was my field, my career, built on precision, integrity, and fairness. But in my family, it had become an excuse for betrayal. That night, I called Dad. His voice was calm, practical as ever. Izzy, you know how your sister gets. If we don't go, she'll take it personally. You've always been the strong one. I bit my cheek until I tasted blood. So it's my job to understand again? Silence. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I sat there in the dark for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator steady, the clock ticking past midnight. The light from my engagement ring reflected off the counter, scattering tiny fragments across the wall, like pieces of something I'd been trying too hard to keep together. That's when everything became clear. My family wasn't cruel in obvious ways. Their weapon was exclusion. I wasn't erased through insults, but through omission, left out of pictures, conversations, and priorities. I'd been conditioned to mistake silence for love, but not this time. I closed my laptop, opened my saved bookmarks, and clicked on a listing I'd saved months earlier. A stone villa in Tuscany surrounded by olive trees. The photos glowed like a dream, warm light against terracotta walls. If they wouldn't show up for me, I'd build something impossible to ignore. The next morning, I booked a flight to Italy. No announcement, no family message, no goodbyes, just a quiet decision. When the plane descended over Tuscany's hills, the light felt softer, almost forgiving. I rented a small car and drove along winding roads lined with cypress trees until I reached the villa. It was older than I expected. Honey-colored stone walls, aged wooden shutters, olive trees stretching endlessly. The caretaker, an older man named Signor Rossi, handed me the keys and said gently, "This place waits for someone who truly sees it." For the first time in months, I felt understood. Inside, the air carried traces of earth and time, as though the house remembered every voice that had ever passed through it. As I walked from room to room, I realized this was more than a property. It was a clean slate, a chance to rebuild my story without anyone editing me out. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into restoring it. Local craftsmen worked with care, treating every beam and brick with respect. The sound of hammers mixed with laughter and cicadas. Each evening, I'd sit on the terrace sketching my vision for the courtyard, a long stone table under vines, strings of lanterns above, no family hierarchy, just one shared table for everyone who chose to come. The locals began calling me La Signora Silencio, the quiet lady. I liked it. My silence wasn't submission anymore. It was strength. When I told my fiancé about the plan, he didn't hesitate. "If this brings you peace," he said, "I'm with you." For the first time in my life, I believed someone meant it. A week later, I sent out new invitations, not the formal gold ones I'd mailed before, but simple cream envelopes with pressed olive leaves inside. Handwritten, personal, honest. The first went to Rachel, my cousin, who never forgot my birthday. Then to Grandma Helen, who always saw through the family's illusions. Soon, replies began arriving. Rachel called first. "We heard what happened," she said. "Aunt Judy told everyone Chloe's wedding was the priority. We're done pretending. Send us the details. We'll be there." Her voice broke slightly, not from pity but from loyalty. By the end of the week, flights were booked. Grandma messaged, "I've missed enough real love in my life. I'll be in Tuscany, my dear." The group chat they made named itself the Real Family Table. Photos of passports, suitcases, and laughing emojis filled my phone. For the first time, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt chosen. Somewhere between the olive trees and fresh plaster, I realized this wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The morning of both weddings arrived under the same sun, 2 lives unfolding worlds apart. In Boston, the air was heavy with nerves and humidity. The hotel ballroom glittered under chandeliers, but tension lingered that even the flowers couldn't hide. Half the seats near the front were empty. Mom stood by the door in her lavender dress, smiling too wide, pretending not to notice who was missing. Dad checked his watch, then his phone, then the door again. "Maybe the flights got delayed," Mom whispered, her voice tight. But no one was coming. Inside, Chloe adjusted her veil again and again. Her bridesmaids whispered, "Where's Grandma? Didn't she always sit in the front row?" Chloe's smile faltered. "She must be running late," she said, though her voice wavered. The photographer shifted, quietly suggesting they move guests forward to make the room appear fuller. Chloe forced a laugh, but gripped her bouquet so tightly, her knuckles turned pale. Meanwhile, across the ocean, sunlight washed over Tuscany's hills, glinting off silver olive leaves. The villa glowed like a painting. Stone walls wrapped in vines, lanterns swaying in the breeze. A long table was set beneath the grape canopy, lined with candles, wildflowers, and handmade clay plates. Rachel's children ran through the trees, and Eli tuned his guitar, softly testing chords for a love song. Grandma Helen sat in the front, holding a small olive branch she'd picked that morning. "A symbol of peace," she said with a smile. I stood inside, watching through the open doorway. My gown was simple silk, unadorned but elegant, catching the soft afternoon light. Lucia, the local chef who had become a friend, pinned a sprig of olive leaves in my hair and whispered, "For good fortune and for truth." When I stepped outside, the breeze lifted my veil. Faces turned toward me, glowing in the golden light. Grandma stood first. "There she is," she said softly. For the first time, I believed her. There was no orchestra, no choreography, just Eli's guitar, the rustle of vines, and the warmth of people who had chosen to be there. As I walked down the aisle, I thought of every empty chair that once marked absence, forgotten birthdays, missed graduations, long silences mistaken for peace. But here, every seat was filled, every gaze met mine. The officiant, a friend of Lucia's, spoke in clear melodic English. "Love is not measured by how many are invited, but by who shows up." The words settled deep within me. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't need notes. My vows came out like a quiet breath. "To the ones who show up," I began, my voice steady. "This love is for you, for those who believed in me before I proved I was enough, for the ones who stayed when it wasn't easy." Rachel wiped her eyes, and Grandma nodded softly, whispering, "That's my girl." When the ceremony ended, the applause was gentle but full of warmth. Laughter filled the courtyard, carrying the scent of truffle butter and rosemary. From Lucia's kitchen came platters of handmade pasta and roasted vegetables. As the sky turned violet, lanterns above flickered to life. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Midway through dinner, Rachel leaned over and showed me her phone. "They're already talking about it," she said, half laughing. Photos were spreading through the family chats, the glowing table beneath the vines, Grandma laughing, Eli's arm around her shoulder. Within hours, the images reached Boston. At the ballroom, Chloe was posing for portraits when a bridesmaid gasped, scrolling through her phone. "Wait, isn't that your family? They're in Italy?" "What?" Chloe frowned, grabbing the phone. On the screen was a photo of me and my husband under the Tuscan sky, our family smiling around the table, Grandma holding her olive branch, Rachel's kids tossing petals. Chloe froze. The photographer hesitated, lowering his camera. A murmur spread through the guests. "Isn't that Aunt Marianne and Uncle Ray? I thought they were supposed to be here." Mom leaned toward Dad, eyes narrowing. "What is this?" she whispered. Dad's face went pale. "It's Esther's wedding." Chloe's breath caught. "They went to hers?" Mom didn't answer. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Guests shifted uneasily. Someone coughed. The band tried to continue, but even the music sounded hollow. When the officiant toasted to family unity, no one raised a glass. Back in Tuscany, laughter rippled through the courtyard as Lucia poured wine and said, "Eat, drink, and remember why you came." Grandma reached across the table and took my hand. "I've waited a long time to see this, Esther," she said. "This is what family is meant to be." The night deepened into gold and violet. Someone started a slow song, and people began dancing barefoot on the stone floor. For a moment, I stepped away, walking toward the olive grove. The air smelled of wood smoke and lavender. Behind me, the villa glowed softly. My phone buzzed, calls, messages, voicemails. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. In Boston, Mom's voice trembled on a voicemail. "Esther, how could you do this to us? Everyone's talking about it. We looked like fools." The next morning, I listened to it while sipping coffee under the same olive tree where I'd spoken my vows. The sun was rising, painting the hills amber. I played the message once more, then deleted it. They thought the embarrassment was the punishment. It wasn't. The real consequence was realizing I no longer needed their approval to move forward. Photos from the wedding continued circulating online, shared by cousins and reposted by friends. One image, Grandma raising her olive branch, became a quiet symbol of truth. No captions, no defense, just honesty. For years, they'd cropped me out of their pictures. This time, I didn't have to fit into theirs. I had built my own frame and filled it with light. A week later, Tuscany was calm again. The lanterns were taken down and laughter faded into memory, but the air still carried traces of what we had created. The long table stood empty, scattered with dried petals and wine stains, proof that something genuine had happened there. One morning, as I packed away the last of the decorations, my phone rang. Mom. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, but something inside me said, Answer. Not for them, for yourself. Her voice was shaky, defensive. Esther, do you know how embarrassed we were? Everyone at Chloe's wedding was talking about your little event in Italy. You made us look heartless. I took a slow breath, watching sunlight crawl across the floor. I didn't make you look anyway, Mom, I said evenly. I just let people see the truth. There was silence, then a trembling sigh. You've always been so cold. We were just trying to keep peace. Before I could respond, another voice came through, Grandma's. Judy, that's enough, she said firmly. You spent years asking this girl to shrink for your comfort. Now she stands tall, and you call it cruelty. No, my dear, that's freedom. Mom said nothing after that. The call ended quietly, like a door closing softly. I stepped outside. The olive trees swayed gently in the breeze. Lucia appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Everything okay? She asked. I smiled faintly. Better than okay, plus it's finally quiet in all the right ways. She looked toward the long table and said softly, Then eat, Signora. You've earned peace. That evening, I placed one last plate at the head of the table, the seat that had always been empty. I tied a small olive green ribbon around the chair and whispered, For the girl who once waited to be chosen. The wind moved through the vines like a sigh, and for the first time I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free. Later, as the sun slipped behind the hills, I poured a glass of wine and thought about Grandma's words. Love isn't management, it's showing up. She was right. You don't need to fight for a seat at someone else's table. Build your own, and the right people will find their way to it. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes the quietest revenge is peace. Subscribe for more stories like this one.